The message notification stayed lit on my phone screen longer than it should have. Call HR right now. 3 words from a coworker who never texted me outside of work hours. I sat on the bench outside the HR office, badge still clipped to my blazer, and I read it 4 times before I understood she meant it as a warning, not a suggestion. My name is Renata Cole. I have spent 6 years at Halden Consulting Group, most of them quietly doing the kind of work nobody notices until it stops getting done. I built the onboarding framework 3 departments still use. I never missed a deadline. I never filed a single complaint, not once, not even when I probably should have. The email that brought me here had landed at 8:15 that morning. Subject line, performance concerns, meeting required. No specifics. Just a calendar invite from my manager, Denise Whitfield, and a time slot squeezed between 2 other meetings like I was an afterthought on her schedule. I reread the invite in the elevator, trying to figure out what I had done wrong, and coming up with nothing that made sense. A woman from payroll walked past me in the hallway and did not make eye contact. She used to stop and ask about my weekend. I looked back down at the text. Call HR right now. I did not call. Not yet. But 3 weeks earlier, none of this had felt like anything at all. 3 weeks earlier, Denise called an all-hands meeting in the open floor area, the kind where everyone stands around the standing desks because there are not enough conference rooms on our floor. She pulled up the client roadmap on the shared screen, the one I had built from scratch, the one I had presented to leadership myself in March. I want to make a change here, she said, tapping the screen with her knuckle. Going forward, Marisol will be taking point on the Kestrel account. I did not say anything at first. I looked at Marisol, who had joined the team 4 months earlier and was still CC'd on emails asking what a statement of work was. She would not look at me. Denise kept talking like she was reading a weather report. Fresh eyes, she said. Sometimes a project needs fresh eyes. After the meeting, I caught her by the break room, coffee pot still hissing behind us. I just want to understand the reasoning, I said. Was there an issue with my work on Kestrel? She did not answer that question. Instead she said, everything's documented properly now, Renata, we're just formalizing our processes. I asked her what that meant, documented how, documented where. She said she would send me something and walked off before I could ask again. Nothing ever came. I went back to my desk and opened my email, scrolling through 18 months of client correspondence, looking for anything that would explain Fresh Eyes needing to replace mine. There was nothing. No complaint, no client email, no performance note in my file, at least none that I had ever seen or signed. That afternoon, I noticed Danielle from finance watching me from across the floor, the kind of look you give someone at a funeral when you know something they do not. When I caught her eye, she looked down at her keyboard fast, too fast, and started typing at nothing in particular. I thought about asking her. I did not. I told myself it was nothing, that people get reassigned all the time, that this was just how consulting worked, fresh faces, fresh accounts, nothing personal. I was telling myself it was one big misunderstanding. I had no idea it was only the beginning. The write-up came through my email on a Tuesday morning, subject line Performance Improvement Plan, sender Denise Whitfield, CC Human Resources. I opened it standing at my desk, coffee still in my hand, and read the word pattern of unreliability 3 times before I sat down. There were no dates. No client names. No examples I could point to and defend myself against. Just phrases like inconsistent follow-through and concerns raised by the team, like I was being graded on a rumor. I called Denise immediately. Concerns raised by who? I asked. She said she could not disclose that it was confidential per HR policy. I asked what inconsistent follow-through referred to specifically, which project, which deadline. She said, Renata, it's all outlined in the document, and if I need to walk you through it we can schedule time next week. There was nothing outlined. I had read every line twice. By Thursday, IT sent a message asking me to update my credentials for a routine compliance review, standard language, nothing alarming on its own. Except when I tried logging into the shared drive that afternoon, my access to the Kestrel files had already been restricted. Not just Kestrel. 3 other accounts I had worked on for over a year. I submitted a help desk ticket. The response came back 4 hours later. Access changes are being handled at the management level. Please direct questions to your supervisor. I sat at my desk with my badge still around my neck, watching people walk past in twos, talking quietly, stopping when they got close to my row. Marcus from operations, who used to send me memes during slow afternoons, suddenly had somewhere else to be every time I looked up. I stopped by Danielle's desk on my way to the printer, tried to keep my voice light. "Everything okay?" I asked. She kept her eyes on her monitor. "Yeah, totally," she said, "too fast, the way people talk when they are choosing every word on purpose." I noticed her glance at her second monitor before she said it, just for a second, like she was making sure something was not visible on the screen. I did not ask again. I told myself people get busy, that this was a stretch of bad luck, restructuring, nothing personal, the kind of thing you hear about in every company at some point. The following Monday, Denise asked me to prepare an onboarding packet for Marisol, a full breakdown of the Kestrel account so the transition would go smoothly. I almost laughed when she said it, standing there with her tablet against her chest like she was doing me a favor by letting me clean up after my own removal. I said sure, no problem, because what else was there to say? Employment means exactly what it sounds like, and I still needed my health insurance to renew in October. I spent that morning inside the shared drive, gathering files, client notes, timeline documents, anything Marisol would need. The drive was a mess the way shared drives always are, folders inside folders, half of them named by people who left the company years ago. I was 2 levels deep looking for an old invoice template when I noticed a folder that did not belong there. It sat inside a subfolder labeled Admin Archive, something I had passed 100 times without opening. This one was named with a string of numbers and letters, no client name, no year, nothing that matched the naming convention every other folder on that drive followed. I only noticed it because my cursor happened to hover over it while I was scrolling, and a preview thumbnail flickered up for half a second before disappearing. I did not open it. I do not know exactly why. Maybe it was the way it sat there, deliberately unlabeled in a folder full of things meant to be found. I took a screenshot instead, an old habit from years of client audits where you learn to document anything unusual before someone else quietly deletes it. I closed the window and kept working on Marisol's packet, telling myself it was probably nothing, an old HR file, a leftover from some department reorg no one bothered to clean up. That screenshot would end up matching more than anything else I did that month. But sitting there that morning, coffee going cold beside my keyboard, I had no idea what I was actually looking at. 3 weeks later, on the morning of my performance review meeting, Danielle caught me by the elevator bank before I had even badged in. She grabbed my arm, actually grabbed it, which was not like her at all. "Call HR right now," she said, keeping her voice low even though the lobby was nearly empty. I asked her what was going on, and she just shook her head and said, "Before your meeting, Renata, I mean it," and then walked toward the stairwell instead of waiting for the elevator with me, like she did not want to be seen standing next to me for too long. I stood there holding my badge, coffee in the other hand, replaying her face. She was not being dramatic. Danielle had worked in finance for 9 years. She did not grab people's arms in lobbies for nothing. I went straight to my desk instead of the break room, opened my laptop, and pulled up that screenshot from 3 weeks earlier, the one from the admin archive folder with the strange naming pattern. My hands were not steady on the keyboard. I navigated back into the shared drive, found the folder again, and this time I clicked into it. It took a second to load. Then it opened into a set of subfolders, and one of them had a name that stopped me cold, a project code I recognized because I had seen it once before, months ago, attached to an expense report Denise had asked me to quietly approve without asking questions, back when I still trusted her enough not to ask any. The meeting was in 20 minutes. I could hear people starting to gather near the main conference room down the hall, chairs scraping, Someone laughing too loud the way people do when they know something uncomfortable is about to happen and want to pretend otherwise. I kept clicking. Every file inside had the same date range, all from the same 3 months, all buried under a project code that did not correspond to any client we had ever billed. My phone buzzed. A calendar reminder. Performance review, 10 minutes. I opened one more file before I let myself stand up, a spreadsheet, dense with numbers, formatted the way Denise formatted everything, right down to the header font she always used on her personal reports. I scrolled to the bottom, past columns I did not fully understand yet, and froze on a line item that connected directly, unmistakably, to the exact expense report I had approved for her all those months ago without question. What I saw in the next 5 minutes changed everything. The line item read consulting fees, external vendor, $42,000, paid out to a company called Brightline Advisory Solutions. I had never heard of Brightline. I had worked on every vendor contract that touched the Kestrel account for over a year, and this name had never once crossed my desk. I opened a second file in the folder, a scanned invoice, and there it was again, same vendor, same signature line, Denise Whitfield, approved. I clicked through 4 more files in the next 90 seconds, moving faster than I probably should have with a meeting closing in. Every invoice from Brightline traced back to the same business address, and when I searched it in a second tab, it matched an apartment complex 2 towns over, not an office building, not a suite number, an apartment. I sat back in my chair. Denise had been routing company funds to a vendor that did not appear to exist anywhere outside these files. Then I saw something that made my stomach turn in a different way. A second subfolder, named with the same strange convention, dated almost 2 years earlier. Inside it, a personnel file that was not mine. A different employee, a different department, the same phrases I had just read in my own write-up, inconsistent follow-through, concerns raised by the team. Same handwriting on the margin notes. Same signature at the bottom. This was not the first time. That was when it clicked, the way a puzzle piece does when you have been staring at the wrong picture the whole time. My reassignment from Kestrel. The vague write-up with no specific dates. The sudden compliance review that stripped my access to exactly the accounts touching this vendor. None of it had been about my performance at all. Someone else, 2 years earlier, had gotten too close to the same thing, and had been pushed out the exact same way, quietly, on paper, before anyone thought to ask questions. I thought back to that comment in the break room, weeks earlier, everything's documented properly now, Renata, we're just formalizing our processes. At the time it had sounded like corporate deflection. Now it sounded like a phrase she had used before, on someone else, right before doing this to them too. My phone buzzed again. Performance review, starting now. Down the hall, I could hear Denise's voice, calm, pleasant, greeting someone at the conference room door like this was any ordinary Tuesday. I sat there with my cursor hovering over the file, my badge still around my neck, my coffee completely cold. Health insurance renewal was in 3 weeks. My rent was due on the 1st. None of that mattered anymore compared to what was open on my screen. The question was no longer whether I would survive this meeting. The question was who I showed this to, and when. I did not overthink it. I forwarded 4 of the files to my personal email first, an old habit from every audit training I had ever sat through, document before you report, because files have a way of disappearing once someone knows you have seen them. Then I opened a new message to Human Resources and CC'd Warren Talcott, the regional vice president 2 levels above Denise, someone I had met exactly twice, both times in passing. Subject line, urgent, financial discrepancy, requesting immediate review. I attached the invoices, the spreadsheet, and a short paragraph explaining where I had found them. My hand was steady typing it in a way it had not been all morning. I hit send at 9:47, 3 minutes before my meeting was supposed to start. I walked into the conference room anyway. Denise was already seated, tablet in front of her, a folder with my name on the tab sitting closed beside it. "Have a seat, Renata," she said, pleasant, unreadable. I sat. She had barely opened the folder when her phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at it, ignored it, kept talking about documented concerns and a path forward. It buzzed again. Then a knock at the glass door, one of the admin assistants, mouthing something through the window. Denise excused herself, stepped into the hallway, phone already pressed to her ear. I sat alone in that conference room for what felt like a long time, though it was probably 4 minutes. Through the glass I could see her pacing near the elevators, one hand pressed against her forehead, nodding fast at something someone was saying to her. When she came back in, she was not the same person who had left. Her voice had lost its rehearsed calm. "Renata," she said, sitting down too quickly, "we may need to pause this conversation. There's something that's come up that requires my attention." I asked if everything was okay, mostly to see what she would say. She looked at me for a second too long before answering. "I need you to hold off on anything else today," she said. "Can we talk later, just you and me?" I almost laughed. Yesterday she had a folder with my name on it and a plan to walk me out the door. This morning, she was the one asking me to wait. Denise was placed on administrative leave by the end of that week. I did not hear it from her. I heard it from an email sent to the whole department, 3 sentences long, effective immediately, an interim manager would be announced soon, please direct all questions to Warren Talcott's office. No explanation. No mention of Brightline, or invoices, or apartment complexes 2 towns over. Just a name quietly removed from the org chart like she had never been there at all. Marcus stopped by my desk that Thursday, the first time he had spoken to me in almost a month. He did not sit down. He just stood there for a second, hands in his pockets, and said, "Hey, I should have said something when all that reassignment stuff happened." I noticed it was weird. I just didn't want to get involved. I told him it was fine, though I was not entirely sure that it was. Danielle came by separately, later that same day, and said almost the same thing, different words, same apology underneath it. I saw some strange approvals go through finance months ago. I didn't think it was my place to ask. I did not push either of them for more than that. I understood it, in a way I did not expect to. Nobody wants to be the person who raises a hand in an all-hands meeting and says something feels wrong, not when a paycheck and a health plan are riding on staying quiet. 2 weeks later, Warren's office reached out to loop me into a broader internal review, not just Brightline, but 2 other vendor names that had surfaced once someone actually started looking. One of them traced back to that second personnel file, the employee from 2 years earlier who had been pushed out under almost identical circumstances to mine. She had never worked at the company again, never gotten a clear explanation, had simply been told her performance was not meeting expectations and moved on with her life not knowing why. Warren's office was already trying to reach her. HR asked me to sit down with legal, not because I was in trouble, but because I turned out to be the only person with a clean paper trail proving when I had seen what, and when I had reported it. I sat in that meeting answering questions for almost 2 hours, walking them through screenshots and dates, watching someone from legal nod slowly at every answer I gave, and at one point go quiet for a long moment after I mentioned the second folder. But the most satisfying part of any of it was not the meeting, or the review, or even watching Denise's name disappear from the directory. Warren called me into his office the following month, not HR this time, just him, door closed, 2 cups of coffee already poured before I walked in. He slid a folder across the desk, and for a second my stomach dropped out of habit, some part of me still braced for another version of that same conversation. Instead he opened it to show me the Kestrel account, my name back in the lead field, effective immediately. He said the client had specifically asked why the handoff happened in the first place, and that nobody had a good answer for them until now. He also told me the performance improvement plan had been formally struck from my file, in writing, with a line stating it was issued without documented cause. I read that sentence twice. It was the closest thing to an apology I was going to get, and somehow it mattered more than one would have. I could have asked for more. People at the office kept saying I should, that I had leverage, that Warren clearly wanted to make this go away quietly and would probably agree to almost anything. I did not ask for a bigger title or a bonus or Denise's old office. I asked for something else instead, that vendor approvals over a certain amount require 2 signatures going forward, not 1. I asked that access changes to shared drives require a written reason logged somewhere, not just a quiet email from IT. Warren looked at me for a moment, then nodded and said he would bring it to the next leadership meeting himself. I did not need anyone walked out in handcuffs to feel like this was resolved. I did not need Denise to grovel. Because the Real win was never about revenge in the first place. A few months later, Marisol, of all people, stopped by my desk with a question about a client renewal, something small, technical, the kind of thing that used to make me brace for another blindside. This time it was just a question, answered in 5 minutes, both of us moving on with our day like colleagues who had never been pitted against each other in the first place. I noticed that, how quiet it was, how ordinary. I had spent months waiting for the next blow to land, and somewhere in there I had forgotten what a normal Tuesday at that job was even supposed to feel like. I never told the whole office what had happened, not the details, not the vendor names, not the 2 hours I spent with legal walking through screenshots. Most people only ever knew the outline, that there had been an investigation, that things had been quietly corrected. I was fine with that. I had not done any of it to be talked about in the break room. I had done it because somebody had to write things down while everyone else decided it was safer to look away. Danielle still texts me sometimes, small things, nothing about that week specifically. I think we both understand it without needing to bring it up. I used to think you had to be the loudest person in the room to protect yourself at work. I do not think that anymore. I think you just have to be the one who keeps records when everyone else has decided it is easier not to. Denise never showed up to explain herself, not to me, not to anyone I know of. I did not need her to. The files had already said everything that needed saying, not just about me, but about someone else who never got the chance to find her own folder in time. My name, at least, ended up sitting quietly back where it belonged.